Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the second installment of our Women in Leadership Conversation series of 2024. A few housekeeping items before we get started. We are recording this session, so we will send out a link to the recording in the next day or so you can rewatch or send it to colleagues. We have built in time to answer questions, so please enter those questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And without further ado, let me hand it over to Margot to get us started.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's great to be here, as you said, for the second in the 2024 Women in Leadership Conversation series. This series is something that I really enjoy, and it's very important to me as a business leader, as a woman, as somebody who has spent their career around building talent. And we know how much talent women have to offer to organizations. So very much something that's close to my heart and something that I'm very excited about bringing to everyone who's participating again this year. One of the ways that we can shine a spotlight and contribute to advancing women is to share the incredible stories and insights of women like Nia Mathis, who's with us here today. Just an opportunity for us to learn from Nia's experience, from her insights, and having worked with many women in an organization as large and as successful as Verizon. And I think that everyone, me included, is going to take away some little nugget of advice, of insight that will help us to advance our own careers. So let's do some introductions, shall we? Very quickly, again, my name is Margot Hoyt, and I have the pleasure of leading a dynamic leadership development team that's part of LHH. LHH is a talent management and human capital partner. My team partners with clients to deliver a variety of solutions that build culture, build leadership skills, and build successful teams. Yes, we also support the development of female leaders. And more broadly, LHH partners with our clients to find professional talent at all levels and to provide career development, mobility, and transition support. Personally, I've been consulting with organizations on their people strategies for over 30 years now, and some of the most rewarding projects have actually been to support women grow and advance their careers. Today, very excited to be talking with Nia Mathis. So Nia is the Vice President and Chief ESG Engagement Officer at Verizon. In this role, she leads external engagement with investors, customers, and other global stakeholders with respect to Verizon's environmental, social, and governance priorities, and business and human rights program as well. Her team advises on integrating sustainable practices across Verizon's domestic and international operations amid a landscape of evolving ESG regulations and practices. Key areas of focus include little things like climate change, human rights in the global supply chain, cybersecurity, and responsible AI. Since joining Verizon in 2008, Nia has held numerous operational and strategic legal advisory roles. She's provided business and legal counsel to various business units ranging from product development to the real estate transactions in support of the 5G network deployment. As well, she served as general counsel to a $10 billion regional sales unit. Nia is a member of the Economic Club of Chicago and has served on the boards of the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce and Women Employed. She was recently named to the 2024 Top 100 Women in Sustainability by Sustainability Magazine. Nia is married to her high school sweetheart. Not a very common characteristic or thing that we can all say we have. She resides in Chicagoland with her 5 children, And she's active in her community and passionate about fostering cultural change and ensuring that the benefits of evolving technology are accessible to everyone in society. Nia, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
It is a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
There's so much good stuff in there, and I know that that's just the great backdrop for a really interesting conversation. As Kate said, you and I are going to have a conversation for some time here, probably the next 20 to 30 minutes. And then we're going to want to open it up for Q&A, all the questions that come in. I will try to remember to give you guys a heads up for those of you who are watching live today to get your questions in, but please feel free to put them in as we go along. All right, let's start with a pretty broad and open question, Nia. You started your career as a lawyer in private practice, and then I think you've been with Verizon now for 15 plus years in various different roles. As you think back about the progression of your career, is there a theme, a philosophy, or a mantra that has helped you and guided you through those types of career decisions and career moves?
There certainly is, and I can remember the words of one of my mentors, Tammy Irwin, for the Verizon folks that are listening, who said, "You really have to be a student of the business." And the way I translated that for me is, Verizon's a huge global company. If you look at a headline that may feature Verizon in any publication, the challenge for me was being able to understand how that, whatever's being reported out publicly, how that related to what I do, how and where the teams that worked on whatever it is that was in that headline, do I know a person on that team? Can I pick up the phone and say, "Hey, I read this article. What's underneath that? What are the pros and cons? What's the story underneath the story?
Mm-hmm.
Do I understand, this global business? It's enough people in the business. It qualifies as a small city, but do I understand where people are at, how the functions relate, and how my function relates to, to what's being done?" So it's like a different version of the New York Times test, right? The other version is don't ever do anything you don't want on the front page. My version was, if I see a Verizon headline, can I place the people, the function, the work? And that's an ongoing challenge to myself, but it makes working here that much more exciting, and it makes it helps me to understand really, and taking that advice, it helps me to be a student of the business. And so when I think about the roles that I've had across time in the legal department, but supporting the business, it's been in a variety of business units or functions within the business. And so, as some of it was covered in the introduction, but I started in the sourcing legal role, and in that, at the time, maybe it was seemed like maybe it was not a very sexy role, but that was purchasing the core components for our network to operate, purchasing the what it is that we need to offer our services to our customers. And sometimes intellectual property deals, but it helped to, it's like a really good grounding on what are the components, like how do we put this together to offer what we offer. And I can go on from there in terms of the different roles and how they were all building blocks into what Verizon is as a business, and everything that it takes to run this business.
You were really building a career that gave you the breadth of understanding about Verizon. You were doing this with the intent of being at Verizon for a good part of your career, I expect, in terms of how you were accumulating the experiences that you would need to continue to advance in senior roles.
Yeah, so when I was graduating from college, it was just around that time where professors were starting to warn students that gone are the days when you can be like a company guy or a company gal. You should expect to move companies several times in your career. It's not like, someone stays 30 years at a company anymore. And so I went into the workforce with that mindset. Now I started in law firm world, which is, that's an up and out environment. So that's not quite what the professor was warning about. But after moving, serving at 2 law firms, then I moved in-house to Verizon. And I had that in the back of my mind. It was, maybe you do a few years here and then you move to another company. But it was striking the number of people that I met day one on who had been here for that many years. And 30, 29, 28, you could just run the numbers down. And so people come and they stay. That's how I felt about Verizon. I said, well, maybe that would be me. I didn't meet too many people who were 2 or 3 years in. Unless, someone was, but just the majority of people had come and had found something that they loved and they stayed. And so in the back of my mind, it became, let me learn as much as I can about this place, because that's how I can increase my value and enjoyment as well, in terms of, my time at the company.
Right. Now, if you believe everything that you read, you might think that women don't have the same kind of career aspirations or drive that men do. Clearly, that's not your case or your experience. Can you tell us a bit about where did your drive come from, and did you experience anybody else's expectations that maybe you weren't up for the kind of advancement that you've already seen?
Okay, yeah, those are two, right. So where does the drive come from? I think it's natural for those of us who just wake up and it's there. And for me, it was, my grandmother's words ring in my ears as well. And she says, if you're capable, go for it. And I think you're capable, so go for it. If you think you can do it, then there's nothing to stop you from doing it. Just keep pushing forward. And so that part is natural. Maybe also being the oldest of 3, like, as big sister, bossy. I don't know, maybe being the oldest, my parents relied on me a lot. And so it's just, the expectation was that you're capable of doing a lot. And so you get to do more. That's just, kind of how life rolls. But, and so that, I think it's natural. The flip side is, not everyone that I've met along my career journey agreed that I had that capability or was supportive of me in my journey. I can say, by and large, I have met way more people who have been open-minded and supportive than those who have been closed-minded and not supportive. But they were, those few people are certainly part of the story that I tell of my journey, because those forces also shape your experience, and they shaped mine. And so but by and large, way more support in the universe than not.
I think we always get questions in these conversations about not only the wind beneath your wings that helped you to move forward, but some of the setbacks. Can you share a bit about, when you had to overcome, maybe somebody thought you have 5 children. Maybe
Yeah.
somebody thought that you didn't want to advance as quickly as you have, or take on as much as you have. What's that been like for you to have to address and work through?
Yeah. So, I'll share a couple of experiences that I think are common. I'm mindful of not making it about any particular place that I've worked or this particular person, because it's not about that. I think we just, as women, we have common sets of experiences with stubborn thinking, like thinking that's really hard to drive out of the American psyche. And so, in my, well, I'll say, when I graduated law school and I started at the law firm, I was pregnant with my first child. So ending out law school, graduation, studying for the bar, and then going into the law firm. And the way that the cycle runs, you get the big class starts in September, and then in December I was going out for maternity leave. So coming back from maternity leave in the spring, there was definitely an expectation that wasn't something that I had stated. There was an expectation that, well, you're a new mom, and so certainly you're going to come back part-time, right? That's what you're going to do. And I was very clear from the beginning when I got back, because I was fortunate to have the support at home, that I was coming back full time. And it was probably over that next year, anytime I would work with a new partner or a new team, I would notice maybe I'm not in all of the meetings, or maybe the workload I was assigned was a little lighter than maybe some of the other associates. And then I'd go and have the conversation and they say, but you're part-time. So we just wanted to make sure that we weren't overloading. And I've never been part-time, never, I'm not part-time. So, that's one example. And I know I've talked with other women who've absolutely faced, that sort of stubborn thinking again, and expectation that wasn't something that we stated ourselves, or something that I stated myself. But then even moving forward, yeah, so that was baby number one. And then even baby number two, which I had my first two children at the law firm. And then coming in-house, and again, being at Verizon, I've met way more people who are supporters than that. But along the way, I did have encounters with people who assumed that because I was a working mom, or my next three children that I did have at Verizon, so I was pregnant 3 more times, maybe assumed that I didn't want to take the biggest deals that required me to work longer hours, or along the way, maybe assumed that I wouldn't raise my hand for a role that would require me to move with my family. And so for both of those, I did my best to address, the person and say, no, yes, I am a working mom. Yes, I am expecting, but I want that opportunity for the biggest deal. Like I absolutely, count me in, don't count me out. And when opportunities came about for new roles, and there was openings, I raised my hand and I tossed my hat into the ring. The one that I think about probably had the most impact on my career trajectory at Verizon was when I was mother of 4 at the time. My youngest was maybe 2, well, maybe a year and a half. And we had an opening at Verizon overseas in India. And the company was looking for a person to go to India and serve as general counsel. And I heard about that opportunity, and I was like, my eyes were like wide with excitement. I was like, can you imagine? Like, that would be the greatest thing ever. And so my colleagues and friends were a little wary for me. I'm like, are you sure? Like, moving over there, are your husband, your kid, like, how would that work? And it's like, we'll make it work. It's fine. So I put my hat in the ring for that. I didn't get that role, but I was one of 2 finalists for the role. And the conversations that I had time and time again with folks who were either directly in the interview process or around it and aware of it, was just the surprise that as a working mom, mother of 4, that I'd be willing to move the family across seas, and that we'd be willing to take that opportunity. And so I did not get that role. But a few months later, I got a phone call saying, well, I know you were interested in, moving clear across the planet. Here we have an opportunity to move across the country, if that's something that you're interested in. And, I remember him saying, like, I probably would not have thought that you would be interested in this role to move across the country, but seeing as
Yeah.
you were willing. And so he said, I got to tell you, it really has helped me to think differently, and not make an assumption that because a female employee, a woman employee has children, or because she's expecting, that there's a limitation. We should ask. He said, I should ask anyway. And so that's a good lesson for all of us.
Right. There's definitely that piece of information there, or insight, is that if you don't state it, if you're not clear that you're interested, others are going to make assumptions for you potentially.
That's right.
That may not be aligned. So that ability to really be, I want to take the next move. I want to learn something else about the business. I'm interested in another culture, another city, another country.
Yes.
If that's what I need to do to move forward, that's put it out there. It's like the secret, right? You got to put it out there for it to
That's
actually
right.
be true.
And I'm sure that embedded in my desire to move and do different things is to move forward, but sometimes that can be interpreted as directly a promotion, right? And depending on your organization, the size of the organization, you know, the people that are around you, there may or may not be that opportunity to move up. And that could be disappointing, right? Depending on, you know, how strong that ambition is or what that ambition is toward. But what I found is that being able to do new and different, that's what was exciting to me. Again, it comes back to the New York Times test. Like, we're a big company. We do a lot. I don't like to feel that I don't understand what's happening outside of my little, you know, area of line of sight. I want to be able to look up and look around and say, oh, I understand that. And I understand that. I know those teams and I understand how it fits together. And so I was driven as much by the promise of learning new and different and going broad and putting as many pieces of the puzzle together as I could. And so after this, the sourcing role, I was excited to move into the marketing legal team. So supported the marketers. And so that's a whole different way of looking at the business, you know, how we talk to our customers. And, you know, marketing includes everything, not just advertisements, but our website, all the fine print, and our Verizon app, right? When you go to interact with us and through the app, there's the fine print, there's the flow, there's how we position things to customers, learning the ins and outs of how we communicate in our stores. Our agents and reps have to go through training so that they are speaking in a certain way, and all the lawyers review all of that, right? And so it's understanding all the different voices and channels through which we communicate to customers, and then wearing the legal hat to make sure that we are providing fulsome, transparent information that's easy to understand and enables our customers to make the best choice for them. After supporting the marketing team, I moved to the team that launches new products and services. And at the time, you know, this was at the beginning of IoT, and everyone was trying to figure out how to get into IoT. And so we're a connectivity company. And so these IoT solutions can ride on our connectivity. And so it's working with the business team to say, you know, what are those solutions? Let's make sure from a legal perspective that they check all of the compliance boxes. But then beyond that, let's think broadly and let's think open-mindedly about, you know, how we can go after these opportunities and really support the business team in thinking and ideating about different aspects of a solution, or taking a note from the previous role, marketing. How do we speak to customers? Who is the customer base, and how do we speak to customers about this? And so as I'm wearing the legal hat and doing the red lines, it's also like taking a little bit of marketing, like, oh, maybe we can tone this up. Maybe we should feature this first, right? And having fun, just being a member of the business team and trying to figure out how we get these products off the ground. After being in that team, I moved from New Jersey, where headquarters is for Verizon, across the country to Denver. And there I was a network lawyer. And so it was the beginning of our 5G deployment, and we had to get permissions to site our small cell facilities in public rights of way. So that brings us into neighborhoods. We're densifying the network and providing this new service. And it required us to negotiate with private landlords, negotiate with jurisdictions, so cities, counties, states, whoever owns the right of way, and explain to them, this is, you know, they were like, why does Verizon want to be in the right of way? It's not something we hadn't deployed in that manner across the country before. And so it was an opportunity to share the goodness of a new technology, how it benefits their constituents, how it benefits businesses, how it makes everyone's lives better. And then we get to negotiation, and that's a different skill set, and it's a different way of looking at the business from the outside in and understanding, you know, this mayor's chief of staff, why would they care, and why do they want to create a new process within their city, you know, to enable this service. And so that was yet a new language and way of working with Verizon. And then I moved to, after doing that role, and moved to be the general counsel of Visible, which is Verizon's flanker wireless brand. And so you may see the commercials now. At first, it was a word of mouth. We wanted to see how far we could go with that service, with it being viral only, like without even putting money into TV advertising, right? It was all social and word of mouth, but now we've graduated and we're on TV now. But that was a startup within the larger Verizon company. How do you incubate this business? its back end is all, supported by Verizon, but the front end, they really wanted a unique voice. They really wanted a unique feel, a unique way to communicate with customers. And so that was an opportunity to do a startup inside of a much larger company. And that was really fun and different from how typically Verizon moves forward on the mature side of the business. And so that was a lot of fun. And then I moved from Denver to Chicagoland, where I am now, to lead a region of the country for our public policy and lobbying functions. So that's at the state level, state legislatures, governors' offices and staff, state AGs. What are the big policy issues for Verizon, and how do we make sure that those stakeholders understand what it is that is needed for business to thrive, both at the state and local level, and then corporate philanthropy at the in the communities. How do we partner and make friends and make supporters, right? Positive promoters of community groups that are excited when they see Verizon coming in to build, or want to understand what's happening with our stores. How do we make those relationships and really get the best side of Verizon out there? And then a year ago, I moved into the role that I'm in now, leading our ESG function. And so it's a little bit of taking all of those experiences and understanding how Verizon is seen internally. Very different teams think of things differently, but even externally, there are so many different stakeholder groups that have different expectations of Verizon, that want to see different things from us, and that all of that background is really helpful in coming into this role, which is essentially stakeholder management around company issues that affect the environment and society.
I think a lot of women and organizations listening to you will say, okay, so here's someone who moved to get different types of experience about every 2-3 years kind of thing. I can anticipate there'll be questions, but how did you know when it was the right time to move? Did somebody say, hey, Nia, I want you to go over here? Was it a combination of that plus you saying, hey, I'm looking around and I've met somebody who's also got similar experiences, but is working now in marketing or is working in these different parts? How did that movement happen for you?
Yeah, so I can say I didn't have some grand plan, or I didn't have, it wasn't all mapped out. It wasn't, the timer didn't sort of go off and I say, okay, now it's time to, none of those things. I think what I attribute it to is when I'm in a role, again, back to that New York Times test, when I'm in a role, I'm always seeking to go beyond what I'm doing, to meet other teams, to understand how we intersect. And so I do a lot of informationals, like one-on-one. Can I have tea? Can we have coffee? Can we grab lunch? With people from other teams that are adjacent and maybe 2 or 3 clicks out adjacent, because I'm trying to understand what I do and how it impacts downstream, how it impacts upstream in this large environment that we are in within the company. And so when you do that, it helps you, when you intersect with other teams, to understand what their goals are. And so even as you're reaching out, trying to get your goal or performance objective met, you're mindful of what theirs are, and you can do that in a way that's more sensitive of their needs as well, right? And so it works out that it's like all these little win-wins, and people feel really great, and then they include you in other meetings, and so then you just have a reputation that spreads and it gets out, and then people start to ask you to join different meetings and then I think over time my managers started to see, oh, she's capable of doing more than this thing.
Mm-hmm.
It starts to, the edges start to grow. And I push the boundaries a little bit, like, okay, I know I'm definitely taking care of this thing that I'm assigned to do, but here at the edges, there seem to be some unmet needs or different ways we can think about in partnering with different teams. And so I think that helps, because then my managers are often then on higher alert when they hear about opportunities. And then it becomes have you ever considered, or would you consider, right? And so, except, so I think there have been 2 roles, have done 8 totals so far. There've been 2 roles in those 8 where there was a job that was posted and I raised my hand for it. And I didn't get either one of those, but they led to, I didn't get anything that I said, oh, I want to do that. But it's stating the intention to the interest in doing different things, right? That still led to people remembering and saying, oh, well, maybe not this, but how about this? And so the other piece of that is I didn't usually, if I got a phone call to have a discussion about a role, it's not something that I had usually, typically thought about before or knew a lot about before. In terms of what that would really mean for me, I was generally aware because, as I said, do the informational, try to be aware, but there weren't specific roles that I knew, like, oh, I know exactly what that is, right? So I was willing to take a risk. I was willing to take a risk, usually based on the relationship that I had with the person who asked. And so I also remember hearing advice from a former CMO who was addressing a group during a Women's Day or month event. And what he said was, there are some roles that I've taken for the company because they're things that I want to do. And there are some roles that I've taken because the company needed me to do them. And as he looked back on his career, he said those roles that maybe were a little bit of a stretch, or maybe I wasn't as excited about, turned out to be some of the most exciting, challenging, and really defining roles. And so I kept that in mind as I would have conversations, and someone would say, well, is this something you consider? And it's like, I hadn't thought about that. I'm not quite sure that fits. I don't even know what I don't know what but it is new and different. So sure. And so that's really how those conversations happened.
It's interesting. A couple of things I take away from that. You've learned from every experience, even when they haven't been positive. There's been good things that have come out of applying for a job and not necessarily getting it, but increasing your brand. A lot of women struggle with the concept of networking. Excuse me. But the way you've positioned it in terms of, look, I'm curious. I want to make sure that the impact that I'm having is informed and really do understand how that interconnectivity of such a large organization comes together. That's a nice way of shifting the mindset about, I'm not networking for my own personal, gain. It's about, I know that I can learn more and be more impactful. And yes, there may be other things that come of that, but first and foremost, it'll help me to do my current duties as well as you can personally do, right? So I think that reframe will be helpful for a lot of people.
That's right. It comes back to that advice about being a student of the business. And as a lawyer, I was especially cognizant of the need to understand the business and not sort of sit on the legal perch and, redlining and yes and no and approved and not approved. That's not helpful. That's not a helpful way of lawyering. The most helpful way to support the business with the legal knowledge is to sit side by side with the person in the business and partner with them, understand their needs, understand what their drivers are, understand what their goals are, understand the ways that they have to work to get things done. And networking is certainly a part of that. Many of those informationals and coffees that I had were not with other lawyers. They were with people in the business, so that I'm understanding, what they do and how they do what they do. And then also with other lawyers as well. But I think especially, being in the legal role, I wanted to, pierce that veil, if you will, and make sure that I was as close as I could, understanding and experiencing life as the business people that I worked with.
Terrific. Some of the things that you've taken accountability for, absolutely. What are some of the things that you see the organization doing to advance yourself, to advance other women that are making a difference? There's a lot of different programs, activities, statements, but what do you see really making an impact today that's helping women to advance?
So I would say, when I take a step back and as I'm approaching, 16 years at Verizon, one of the things that I've loved and really respect about the leadership at Verizon is the consistency. Consistency in the message that people matter, employees matter, women matter, employees of color matter. And no matter which way the winds are blowing on the outside of the company, within the four walls, that has been a consistent and growing. It wasn't as strong when I started. It was there. And then over the years, it's just become a louder presence within the four walls of Verizon. And you see that, to your point, through a variety of programs. But I think it's the consistent visibility and transparency and presence of these topics of discussion. So the discussion that we're having now it's a common discussion in Verizon, right? When we hear from women leaders, when we hear from our leaders of color, when we hear from our leaders that are white males, but are saying, this is how I support, this is how I ally, and this is why it's important, excuse me, for all of us to embrace diversity and inclusion. And so that is what I love about working at Verizon, and that's what's made it feel authentic, because it's not a program that's here today and then, whatever happened to that. It's consistent, and it has been across a decade plus.
Truly integrated in the culture and the mindset of how people lead there. Right.
That's right. That's right.
Excellent. We're going to get to some questions here, but I am going to ask you, in 2024, your advice to women is likely different than it would have been even a decade ago. When you think about supporting other women to advance their career, what do you share with them? What's your advice to individuals today?
So first, I'm mindful that advice should really be context specific. So it's more that I look back at my journey and I say, what are the things that I've learned, and I can share those things. And maybe they're advice, maybe it's not. And so I'm cautious about characterizing it as something as advice, because we're all in different steps along the journey, coming from different backgrounds. We have different needs, and it is very context specific. But when I think about what has helped me as I reflect, it comes back to building the strong reputation, which I talked a little bit about, how I looked at doing that, but it's being helpful to others, being flexible, because you never know where the next opportunity, the business may start a new division, it's a new product or service, and there's a way that you have to think about, how do I orient to support that, and take risk, right? So that taking a risk and taking a risk, even saying that, may feel differently depending on where your risk orientation is, right? So if you have a very low appetite for risk, just push yourself a little, right? And if you have a huge appetite for risk, then maybe some of the things that I would consider taking a risk, maybe not, doesn't seem like it so much, but just being willing, another way that I've heard it said is get comfortable with being uncomfortable, in terms of, you're going to be asked to develop and flex a different muscle skill wise, or you'll be in a different area outside of the expertise that you built up all these years. Like it could be, okay, I have to learn a whole new area, or a new set of people, or it's moving, right? A different part of the country or the world. But be willing to take risks. That's really what I mean, is to be comfortable with getting into an uncomfortable situation, because that's when you're learning something new. If that's what you want to do. Not everybody wants to, but if you want to, those are certainly some components of the advice. The other piece is building relationships. I mean, that is so super important. And the way that I've gone about building relationships is starting with, and it naturally flows, just caring about people. And I mentioned before that one of the things I respect so much about so many leaders at Verizon, business leaders, when they put together their vision statement or their team, vision or motto, it starts with people. People matter. Care about people. You focus on people. Like, these are the different ways that I've heard the business leaders stated, and it's natural, and that aligns to how I orient as well. It's that people won't remember what you said or what you did, but how you made them feel. Right. And so I'm guided by that, and in my interactions with my colleagues, with my coworkers, with business, the business teams that I support. Sharing myself is also part of building relationships. That was harder for me to do a little bit at first, because as a mom and as a working mom, and especially with having the number of kids that I have. And I share some of those experiences where people may make assumptions based on the fact that you have a big family. So if I'm at a happy hour, 15 years ago, I'm probably not sharing as much about being a mom or working mom, because I don't want people to think, oh, I don't want her on my projects, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so, but I've had to, the discussion has advanced. Times are different now than they were then. And even I attribute a lot to the summer, as I say, at the summer of George Floyd, in terms of as being um, a woman of color, that encouragement to share more of yourself has brought out the woman part, the mother part, in addition to of color. So this is something that I'm more recently, within the past 3-4 years, learning how to bring more of sometimes the self that I put further back, because it may not have been comfortable or palatable, or assumptions may be tied to it. And so I used to be very carefully curated in what and what I shared, and carefully curate my hobbies. Like, what do you like to do for fun? It's like, well, my kids, I don't want to say, oh, we have baseball, we have soccer, we have, instead it would be, I enjoy stargazing. Something else that's, carefully curated. But now it's like, no, I mean, this is who I am. So I'm a little late to that party. So I could probably have taken advice from other women in terms of, having come to that blend sooner. The other piece of advice in terms of building relationships that has rung more true as time has gone by is the need to bring your peers along with you on your journey. What does that mean? Well, if you are looking to, once you get into a role and you're looking to be impactful in that role, you really have to be willing and able to influence and move others along with you. And so when you think about your approach to dealing with people from a caring perspective, and you think about sharing who you are, not just on the personal, but even from the work perspective, this is what I'm trying to accomplish. These are some of the challenges that I'm facing. Bringing your peers along means that you are thinking and about them and are mindful of them as you're navigating that journey, and you're thinking about how you can help them, and you're thinking about what information you can share with them. And so that it's not like, you're full steam ahead and darn, the torpedoes, but you are thinking about, it's a closely knit circle, like the team of people that you are peers with, either direct because you report to the same boss, or because you are aligned together on projects. And so it takes time and effort to one-on-one with those individuals. Maybe women may not, maybe men may, it doesn't matter like who they are. It's, you have to, figure out how to establish that line of individual line of communication and relationship, and learn how to bring them along with you as you're working towards your goals, because it goes back to also being willing to understand how you can get the win-win, what their goals are, and so that you don't have this, because that gets in the way of you being as impactful as you want to be in the role you find yourself in.
Excellent. So many pieces in there. Nia, thank you. I am going to start to go to the questions, and I see there's taking a bit of a bump here as we go, so I need to get to some of these. So how to help managers to get rid of assumptions that someone with a young child is not interested in more work and or responsibilities. You talked a bit about, first you got to just say it, get it out there, tell people that you're interested. Is there any other advice you have or experience you have in helping somebody to understand what your aspirations are?
So there's the direct conversation, which is super, super important. And you may need to repeat that on some periodic basis if you don't see sort of the results flowing. It's conversations sometimes with your peers, because it could be hey, do you need help on something? I have, an interest in this area. I'm willing to pitch in and help. Because sometimes that makes its way back to the manager too, and then that emphasizes the willingness to roll up your sleeves and like do more work. And then I think it is it's speaking, but then it's also what I have found. Sometimes the softer approach is, if you have time with your boss, and it's like, oh, you have time in a one-on-one, think of business topics to discuss, right? It's not just what's on the list and here's what I need from you and here's what you need from me, but it's, go back to, it could be something, a headline, a new product, it could be something, some announcement that happened within the company. Like open up a line where it's really comfortable with your manager to talk about the business, going back to being a student of the business. Ask them, well, what do you think about this new division? And I thought maybe, the company would position it this way or that way, or the pros and cons, or our competitors did X or Y. Open that dialogue, because then the human condition is such that the person won't be able to help but to start to think of you more than just a working mom. But
Right.
you have ideas, you have thoughts, and you want their ideas and thoughts. And so think about how to open that relationship that's based on it's always a curiosity but exploratory thoughts about the business. I have done that from time to time, and it's been successful.
I think that's really fascinating, because what you're doing is you're building a relationship built on where you want to go, not what might be holding you back. So if your conversations tend to gravitate towards home and the kids and what you're doing, that will be what they're left thinking about.
That's right.
As opposed to, oh, they had some really interesting questions, ideas, and thoughts that will be really useful for the business.
That's
Very
right.
nice. How did you cope with raising kids and moving up the ladder? There's basic stuff in here like school pickups, managing workload.
So this is one where like I can say, this is not an advice thing, because this is context specific. So for me, that high school sweetheart that I married, he made the decision after our first child was born to be the stay-at-home parent. That is really the answer. Now, probably like if he was on here, that would be a good question to ask him, because juggling that with 5 kids is still not easy. Like it's still,
No.
I mean, the oldest is in college now, the youngest is in elementary. They make their way up, right? But it's still not easy. And so the juggle for me was more, and it's still, the paperwork explosion in the emails, like for every, like all of my kids are in different schools at every level, different schools. And so there's a different set of, emails and requirements and deadlines and calendars and so that is, how to manage that. It is, some things, juggling all the time, and sometimes a ball drops. That's what happens. Now you can't not pick up your kids, but maybe that form doesn't get turned in, like you have to just, scan it and email it because the kid didn't put it in the backpack, right? Kind of thing. So I'm sorry that I do not have like the magic advice, but in our life, what has worked for us, and the reason that we, went on to have more children and continue to grow the family over the years, was that one of us made that decision to stay home.
I also heard you say you've got to have some grace. I think some people really find that they're trying to be perfect in every aspect of their life, and life goes through phases, right? Where you have young children, where you have older children, where you need to be just mindful that you're not going to be perfect in every aspect all the time, right?
And tying to that, because I think maybe I heard the question was tied to how do you climb the ladder while you're raising kids? And so the other thing in terms of even combining with what you said with grace is you can't do everything all at once. You can't do everything all at once. You can do everything over time, but not all at once. And so when there are more intense times in your home life, when the children are younger, or it could be a season, depending on what's happening, with your children or your spouse or your significant other, there may be times when you're like, right now for this 2 or 3 year period, my focus is going to be here. I will do the job and I will do what I need to do at the job, but my focus will really need to be on maintaining sanity here. And then you get past that 2 or 3 year stretch, and then you're like, okay, now I can do more. I think for me still, I look forward to the point in my career when I'm an empty nester, and then that's still yet another stretch of availability and a way to heighten what I can do in my career. So I am mindful that even as I've accomplished what I've accomplished, there's still more that I'd like to do, but I'm realistic. My youngest is 10. I see how fast it goes with the oldest at 10, 12, 14. 17 and 22. So I see how fast it goes. And so there are some decisions that I will make to say, you know what, I want to enjoy this a little bit more. So maybe I'm not going to try to, move across seas and take on that really, really big role right now because I want to have these years. And so there's a flex, and there's an acknowledgement that, if all goes well, knock on wood, pray wherever you get your strength from, that you will have a long runway. You will have a long runway. It doesn't all happen in 5 years. You have a career that is, what is it, 30, maybe 40 years long. And so pace yourself, understand what the priorities are for that given season and be good with that.
Yeah, terrific. Excellent. Here's one. What advice can you give for an instance where you are not a successful candidate for a role that you were really excited about to advance your career?
Yeah. So when I experienced that, the 2 times that I went out for a specific role and didn't get it, it's you sort of, you retrench, like go back and you count your chips and you say, okay, deep breath, where am I? What would I like to do? And is it here at this same organization? Are there reasons, as you go to your pros and cons list, are there reasons to stay? Are there reasons to go? Analyze that specific situation. Did you get feedback and understand, the why and the what you need to work on? Or is it time to look for something else somewhere, right? And there's a big span of like discussion points, right, in between those two. You want to have people that, inside the company, if you have some colleagues that know you very well, that can talk with you through it and understand maybe there's a different way to look at it. Maybe the skill set that you thought you had, if you put a different gloss on it, it might be this over there instead of that over there. So having your group, your crew, your cabinet of people that know you, know your skills, know your strengths, and understand the dynamic within that organization, it's really going to be helpful versus someone who doesn't really necessarily understand. It could be that it was a totally unfair situation, like totally unfair, right? That happens.
It happens.
Right. And so you want to know, or is it something that, well, you're my friend, but let's figure out how we can talk this through, because maybe you're not seen as X or Y. And maybe, that friend can talk you through it. Have you talked to this person for advice? What does your mentor say? Have you talked with, you used to work for so-and-so. Don't they know so-and-so? Why don't you ask, right? Someone that can talk you through and help you to think through maybe things that you're missing about yourself, right? In that journey toward building better and better self-awareness, or about the situation that has nothing to do with you. There could be other dynamics outside of you. That is why the chips fell where they did.
Always.
So having people who will tell you the truth about yourself, and then who can, is to the extent that they can, tell you that some of the dynamics that were in play can help you to decide whether it's something you need to sit and work on, or sit and wait until the next opportunity, or go and build your, future someplace else. So there's a lot in there.
Yeah, and it's the experience, right? With every experience like that, there can be some lessons learned and some opportunity there. There's a few questions in here around mentorships, allies, sponsors. That could be a whole other hour. We have about 5 minutes, but maybe you could talk quickly about the importance of mentorship. You mentioned mentors just a second ago, and or sponsorship in your journey, and how you think about those relationships.
Right. So mentors are those that from time to time I've reached out and tapped and asked for. There's something I see in them, something of what, they've accomplished that I feel I can learn from them. And, that coffee, that tea, can I talk to you about this and get your advice and thoughts on this? My experience, and what by and large, the way I think it's accurate with sponsors, you don't go tap someone to be a sponsor. Sponsors will notice you, and I'm not saying keep your head down and do your work, and don't, keep your head up and talk to many people, do many things, but sponsors will notice you based on the way that you've built your reputation and the way that you've built your relationships. And a sponsor may not even interact with you personally. I've had, or often or frequently, I've learned later that there have been those people along the way in my career that were sponsors that I didn't realize that they were sponsors, but based on the reputation and the relationships that I had built throughout the organization, people talk. People talk, they compare notes, right? Information flows. And so your reputation will precede you, and there will be someone in a room that may pick up on that reputation or have a small conversation with you, and you may not even know where it was placed or why. So sponsors will come about if you focus on building your reputation for doing great work, and all the other things, you know, that we talked about, how you go about that, your and your relationships, the relationships that you build with others, so that other people see you as a person that they want to work with, a person that they'd love to, you know, to be on their team, a person that they feel confident in, a person that they feel like they can learn from. When you carry yourself doing that, the sponsorship normally, typically, naturally will come. And if it doesn't, then that's also part of, do you stay or do you go? You have to figure out what's best for you.
Yeah, terrific. We do have a few minutes left, and there's a great question here about if you're not in an organization right now and you still are looking for some of those stretch opportunities, or, you know, being able to take a risk, advice for that in terms of, you know, how do they follow your example and still find those risks or stretch opportunities?
So the way I'm thinking of some fantastic women that I've met over the past couple of years who are between roles, and where do I meet them? At conferences, as part of organizations, fellow board members in organizations. Like, find those external gatherings of people where, you know, a conference, you pay for a conference and go. But if it's something that's tied to your area of expertise, if there's, you know, an organization where you can volunteer or get involved or run for and, you know, an officer position, that's where I see women who are, again, in transition, learning, meeting other women that can help to extend their network, learning about what new opportunities there are, learning about different companies, learning about different company cultures, again, meeting new people, learning about different areas of expertise that maybe they should, you know, shift a focus toward. And so find that organization or those organizations that are, you know, fitting for what you do, what your interests are, and, you know, where you live, etc.
That's terrific. It's perfect. And it goes back to be curious, be involved, have conversations, and add value. It's interesting, just that kind of brand piece about have conversations about the things you want to be remembered for.
That's
right.
Yeah.
And through that, doors have opened for you, and they will for others as well.
Right.
We have to wrap up this conversation. That's been one of the fastest hours of my life. Really enjoyed learning more about you, Nia. Very much enjoyed you sharing your insights and your stories with others. We do have one more conversation left in our conversation series. For those of you who were able to join us, it's on April 30th with Lisa Mello, our Canadian participant in this conversation series from the Royal Bank of Canada. She's the VP of Learning and Performance. Nia, one more time, thank you so much. I hope everybody who has joined has taken away that nugget we promised at the beginning. I have a list here, but we'll talk to you again. And thanks everybody for joining us today. Bye for now.
Thank you.